Welcome to the Big O Show on the Overreaction Sports Network, powered by Believe.
Still the same damn kid from Oklahoma, same old dreams hanging off my shoulders, wishing and waiting on a shooting star for all to see.
And now your host, straight out of Oklahoma, former Buffalo Bill, Jerry Ostrowski.
I'm still the same damn kid from Oklahoma.
Welcome, Bills Mafia. I am Jerry Ostrowski, host of the Big O Show here on the Overreaction Buffalo Sports Network. We are powered by Believe, and thanks for tuning in Wednesday night, 8 Eastern, 7 Central. And we'll bring you up-to-date content here about the Buffalo Bills. And remember, we started a new venture here on Overreaction. It's called Overreaction Buffalo Daily, where I will have a daily show about the latest news for the Buffalo Bills and at One Bills Drive. And we'll do that every day on YouTube, 10 a.m. Eastern, 9 a.m. Central. You can also check it out on all of your podcasting platforms. And we've got the draft coming up in 8 days, and all is quiet in Orchard Park. Brandon Beane, the scouting department, personnel directors, everybody's locked in the war room. They're going through different scenarios, different trial drafts, things like that, final evaluations of players as they get ready for next Thursday night's first round, which will take place in Green Bay, Wisconsin. And we're looking forward to the draft. This time of year is one of my favorite times of year. I get the Masters for a week. We get a week off, and then we get 3 days of the NFL draft. And this show today on the Big O Show, we're going to talk a little bit about possible draft scenarios for the Buffalo Bills. Obviously, cornerback, defensive tackle, edge rusher. Those are the three big needs. But the Bills have some things coming up with their football team that it would probably benefit them to possibly take a look at during this draft here in 2025. And that is the topic of today's show. What are potential needs that the Bills can address in this year's draft once they get their immediate needs filled? Or if there's a player that's just not viable for the pick they're getting to make, do they go a different direction? So there's some things and some areas that the Bills possibly need to strengthen up this year in the draft so that they can maybe get a little bit of a head start on 2026, because there's some big things getting ready to happen. First thing is this, and we all know that Connor McGovern came to the Buffalo Bills from the Dallas Cowboys. Connor played a bunch of guard. His first year in Buffalo was as a starting guard. Then they moved Mitch Morris, who obviously played in Jacksonville for one season. When Connor McGovern took over, Mitch retired this year from the NFL after a very, very illustrious, a really good career in the league. But can the Bills get Connor McGovern re-signed? And just to give you a little bit of background on what a starting center in the NFL would be worth, Creed Humphrey of the Kansas City Chiefs, he's the highest paid center in the NFL. He makes $18 million a season. Drew Dahlman of the Bears, he makes $14 million. And Frank Ragnow of the Detroit Lions, he's sitting at $13.5 million. You would have to think that Connor McGovern, at the rate he has played and what he means to this football team and the rapport and friendship that he has built with Josh Allen, they're going to get this contract redone. The other night on the Daily Show, I actually predicted that this is probably the next contract that Brandon Beane redoes before the end of the season, and that's to get Connor McGovern inked on paper and get him locked up for a while. But here's the deal. with the Buffalo Bills being cap strapped, and I'm going to get into some other scenarios as well, because this offensive line, if all these things happen, the offensive line in Orchard Park could be one of the highest paid offensive lines in football. And I'll get to the other part of this equation here in a second. But if you look at Connor McGovern, and here's the deal, folks, money talks. You can say what you want about loyalty. I know these guys that re-signed this year all signed for team-friendly type contracts. But a starting center the caliber of Connor McGovern can demand quite a bit of money in the NFL. And money talks. If he gets a deal elsewhere that he just can't turn down, is the answer at center for the Buffalo Bills Cedric Van Pran Granger? Obviously, Van Pran Granger, a rookie last year, 5th-round pick from Georgia, played a lot at guard, not as much at center. We talked about his limitations at the center spot. He's not the most nimble of offensive linemen. I liken him to an old school center that would play against a head-up nose in a 3-4. He gets his hands on you. He can move you. But as far as second-level stuff goes, not near the athlete, not near the player that Connor McGovern is. Now, if you look at the Bills' rushing game, with them going to more of a gap scheme, which is power and counter, pulling stuff, and then you also look at the Bills and them being enamored with more of an outside zone scheme as opposed to duo, where it's more pure double teams, and the Bills getting movement and displacement horizontally as compared to vertically, Van Pran Granger might be limited in that role. So do you go ahead with your 10 picks this year and maybe try to find a young center that fits the mold a little bit more of what Connor McGovern can do if he does not re-sign with the Bills? So that is one area. One thing about Van Pran Granger, and obviously if the Bills were to pick a center this year and try to groom him to get him ready, because that's the thing about what I'm talking about today, folks. When you look at these scenarios, and again, we're not talking about cornerback. We're not talking about D-tackle or nose. We're not talking about edge. We're talking about guys that can fill roles for the Bills after this season, because there's some big things coming up. And you look at these guys, and the thing that is a benefit of getting them in-house now as opposed to getting them in-house next year, they have a whole year under their belt. They can groom them, and Aaron Cromer can work with these guys and get them up to speed to where there's not as big of a gap. But if the Bills can't get Connor McGovern re-signed, I believe they truly will. But if they cannot, what is their answer at center? So I think that center is a possible area that the Bills can address with, if they don't use their 2 4s to get up to number 3, you got 2 4th-round picks. You got a couple of 5ths, some 6ths. Do they go offensive center in day 3? Another area of need, and it goes along the lines of this offensive line, and we talked about it a second ago. There are some big things getting ready to happen in Orchard Park. If they re-sign McGovern, he becomes one of the highest paid centers in the league. Like I said, third on the list is $13.5 million. That's Frank Ragnow of the Lions. You've already got 2 of the more higher paid tackles in the league. I know that Cedric Brown's contract was user-friendly, but you still got Dion over there that demands that kind of money and deserves it, and so does Spencer. Then you have a highly paid center. The guy that plays to the right of him is also getting ready to play on an expired contract. Osiris Torrance is a guy for the Bills that's going to demand a huge amount of money. Torrance was a 2nd-round pick, so we don't have the luxury of the 5th-year option. If you franchise tag this season, if you franchise tag a guard in the NFL, a guard is worth $23.4 million. So it is safe to say that a young player with the upside like Torrance, the ability to physically grab and move people, the play level that he's been at in his first years in the league, is going to demand $24 million at least. And I think the Bills have to understand, and the Mafia has to understand this. Bills Mafia, you need to understand this. while team-friendly contracts are great, they're not the norm. And if a guy like O'Cyrus Torrence can get more than $24 million a season someplace else, and the Bills aren't willing to get close to that, I have no problem with him going to another team. That's why he is playing football. Yes, it's competition. Yes, you want to win titles and championships, but you also want to provide generational money for your family. And $24+ million a year is generational money. So you have to think about that. Are you going to spend too much money on McGovern to where you can't just re-sign Torrance? So with your third day picks, do you go out and get a guard, a road grader type of guard that matches Torrance's abilities and the skill set that he has? Buffalo can look in-house. You got third-year pro utility lineman Alec Anderson. Is he the answer? Obviously, he's done a wonderful job being that extra lineman that David Edwards did the year before, where he comes in, plays tight end, plays on the end of the line of scrimmage, adds some gaps to the offensive front of the Bills and makes defenses have to defend an extra gap, which gives them some luxuries in the run game. Is the answer seventh-year pro guard center Will Clapp? Clapp, I believe, of LSU. His seventh year, he's been on and off the Bills roster. Not so sure that he's the answer. But here's the other piece of this puzzle now that you have to address as well. We've talked about McGovern. We've talked about O'Cyrus Torrence. David Edwards is playing on an expiring contract. So if the Bills want to bring him back, they're going to have to pay a little bit of money. Now, I think Edwards is a guy that the Bills probably let go. They probably let him walk. They feel they probably can either get a draft pick in this year's draft, or if Cromer and the likes believe that Alec Anderson or Will Clapp or one of those guys, or even Cedric Van Pran Granger is the answer, slide him into that spot. Edwards fills a very specific skill set and need for the Bills. He's tall, he's long, he's not overly powerful, but he moves extremely well. And he fits that scheme that the Bills are running, which is that horizontal displacement, moving guys by running out of your stance. So a group in Buffalo that a lot of us, including me, are extremely high on, in one season could completely be blown up and look completely different. So with some of these day three picks, do the Bills and Brandon Beane, is it to the point where they need to go ahead and bring in some talent in the offensive line to make sure they have guys ready to go if these things happen in a doomsday scenario? Hopefully, all three of them are back. Hopefully, McGovern and Torrance are at least back, and we can figure out the left guard spot. But those are things in this draft, because we've been so focused on cornerback, we've been so focused on D tackle, nose, and edge, that we forget there's other things going on this football team that have to be talked about and have to be looked at as we move into the draft that begins next Thursday night. Another area that the Bills could possibly use a day three pick on, and I say day three, but I'll be honest with you. If you're sitting there at number 2 and one of these really, really highly rated players at one of these positions is available, do you reach and take a guy 10, 15, 20 spots out of where you have them graded just to fill a need? Or do you bring somebody in that can play guard, or somebody in that can play center, or somebody in that can play multiple spots up front on the offensive line? Or do you bring somebody in that can play tight end? Obviously, the Buffalo Bills moved up in the first round to take Dalton Kincaid, got in front of the Dallas Cowboys, and got him signed. Kincaid, after a pretty solid, good, productive rookie season, took a step back last year. We come to find out as the season was over that the knee injury was quite a big deal, was a big issue. He was fighting through some things. And then that brings up all these other question marks. Is he strong enough? Is he big enough? Is he durable enough? Is he doing the things he needs to do in the offseason to be the productive pro that the Bills think he can be due to his size and athleticism and all those things? But should the Bills draft a late round tight end to start grooming him to get him ready to replace the contract we all want to talk about, Dawson Knox? Dawson Knox not getting any younger. Dawson Knox, another year older this year, with a $14,568,000 cap hit on this team. Is this contract worth the production that he's putting up? You have to understand that the Bills are a football team this season that released Quentin Morris. Quentin Morris was kind of the utility tight end, could do it all. Obviously, was good for a couple big plays this season. They were usually touchdowns. But his biggest contribution to the Buffalo Bills was his ability to play on all special teams as a big man. Big man special teamers are hard to find. So you move on from Quentin Morris. Can the Bills rely on practice squad player, tight end Zach Davidson, who's a third-year pro from Central Missouri, to fill that void? I think Davidson is one hell of a route runner. I think he's tremendous in getting upfield and creating space and taking advantage of mismatches. But is he a guy that's really a fully rounded, well-rounded tight end, especially when the best blocker you have is the guy that's the oldest, and that's Knox? Kincaid is willing, not always able. His skill set obviously is in the passing game. Are you going to rely on another guy that has the same skill set that Dalton Kincaid has? So I think the Bills need to look at the tight end spot in this draft. Is it a position that you go out of your way to get? I don't know, but if you're sitting with 62 in the second round, the cornerbacks have been blown up. I think there's enough depth at defensive line that you could probably wait till round 3 if you use your 4s to trade up, unless the Bills traded number 30 and package that to also get an extra second-round pick and a third-round pick. You have to look at tight end this season. I think it's an area that you really have to pay attention to. As I reported yesterday on the Overreaction Buffalo Daily Show, Jadon Blue, running back of Texas, was in the building yesterday at One Bills Drive. He was in for a top 30 visit. A guy that's incredibly fast, a slasher. Not a guy that's big in his lower body, so he can make people miss, but he doesn't bust a lot of tackles, but is an absolute weapon in the passing game. Takes advantage of mismatches with linebackers covering him, can run all sorts of routes, was tremendously productive in the passing game for Texas. If he's available, now he is a guy that's thought to be a second, third round grade guy, which is why I thought it was interesting they had him in for a visit. We talked a little bit about this yesterday on the Daily Show, but are the Bills willing to draft a running back and move James Cook during the draft? We all know what is going on this offseason with James Cook. He wants $15 million a season. Another thing that you have to take into consideration, that no running back drafted by Brandon Beane has received a second contract. If you remember Zach Moss, who he picked from Utah with, I think, the 86th pick, if I remember correctly, was shuttled off in a trade in the middle of his third year. So if your big three, your targets for your big three aren't there, you're sitting at the bottom of the second round, if you're sitting in the third round, and a Jadon Blue or a like running back is there, do you take him? Considering that James Cook, who you can let play his contract out, and that's what I would hope the Bills would do, unless they get an offer to move up into the top 18, top 15 that they just can't refuse. But Cook's cap number is $5,701,375. He's let it be known what he wants. Bills pretty much seem completely disinterested in that amount of money. So I think it would be important for the Bills to look at running back. You also look at the linebacker position. Matt Milano, after his redo, is playing on a expiring contract. Milano, who has done a ton for the Buffalo Bills defense, but as of late has been injury prone and not on the field as much as the Bills would like. Redid his contract. It's expiring. And you have to look at linebacker as well. Dorian Williams has been incredibly productive and seems to be the heir apparent to Milano. But that means the Bills are going to have to groom backups. We remember last year with all the injuries at linebacker, backup options were slim. It's been that way the last 2 years. And with the linebackers of the Bills not being incredibly big men, you would have to think there'd be some injuries there again. So do the Bills go ahead and look at the linebacker spot? Is that an area that they need to go ahead and find at least backup players? So the thing that's interesting about the Bills this year, and it's funny because a lot of people have been talking about the Bills having 10 draft picks, and surely not all 10 picks are going to get done. They'll trade some away. Surely all 10 guys won't make a roster. But if you look at the holes on this football team, besides the blatant needs, the Bills do have some areas they need to bolster. They need to prepare that doomsday locker in case the offensive line situation just blows up if you can't get deals done for McGovern and Torrance, and then also David Edwards playing his last year out. Talked about tight end, talked about running back, and we talked about linebacker. So I feel good that Brandon Beane and company have 10 picks, and they have those in their pocket because they can move around, do some things, but it is important for the Bills to be proactive because when you look at these cap situations, I think the fact is this. If you're constantly chasing free agents, you're constantly going to be behind the eight ball as far as the cap goes. Because if you're chasing free agents, and it's okay to sign a couple. I don't have a problem with that. But the league has to be, and it's moved this way. NFL teams have to be built upon the draft because of the money that these guys make. Because of the fact that first-round picks have a fifth-year option. They have to be built upon the draft. And I don't believe you can wait around for something bad to happen and then all of a sudden go, well, what are we going to do? We got to go sign free agents. So obviously, besides the big three, and Bob brings up a great point. You know, Bob brings up a great point, something we've been talking about the defensive ends for quite some time. Bosa's on a one-year deal and will play for one last payday. AJ probably won't be in Buffalo after 25. That could be two edge spots to fill. And I agree. And that's the point of the show today, is that we are fixated on these spots, and we need to be. But I think that there's other positions as well. And we talked about it last year going into the playoffs. A lot of people put the complete onus upon the defense. And yes, they were responsible for quite a bit of what had happened. Personnel and such just not being up to speed and at the level that the Bills' offense was at. But you've got to build and prepare for, for doomsday situations. If you look at Kansas City this year, they sat tight with their offensive line, and it bit them in the end. They lost the Super Bowl because of it. They didn't play very well all season. But their roster was strong enough to be able to win a lot of games and get where they needed to be. Was it the blowout, crazy production, Kansas City-like victories? No, it wasn't. But their offensive line came back to bite them because they didn't address it. So I think if, when you have a situation where the Bills are one of the top teams in the league as far as number of picks. You need to start looking at the future, especially with some of these day 3 guys, and especially with the fact that Brandon Beane has come out and said that we need more body types that are special teams type dudes. And you can get those teams type players with these picks. So, as always, folks, I appreciate you. Thanks for joining the Big O Show. I want to talk a little bit about maybe some areas of need today that just really haven't thought about too much. We'll be back tomorrow morning at 10 a.m., 9 Central, with another edition of Overreaction Buffalo Daily. That show will be Monday through Friday. We won't have one on Saturday and Sunday, but we will have one Monday through Friday. Again, Sunday night will be the Overreaction Buffalo Sports Network show that we have with Joe and John Fina, and we'll talk probably more draft. We'll probably get into some more visits and things like that and such. So once again, folks, we appreciate you. We'll be back next week at 8 Eastern Time, 7 Central, with another edition of the Big O Show. Hit the like button. Hit the subscribe button. Appreciate you guys. Thanks for watching. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for listening to the podcast. We're on all major podcast platforms. We wouldn't be here if it wasn't for you, and we appreciate you. So as always, folks, much love. Go Bills.
I'm still the same damn kid from Oklahoma. Same old dreams hanging off my shoulders. Wishing